Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. We've had a lot of fun preparing for today's webcast, and I'm thrilled we're getting started. So our topic is customer loyalty, how to earn it, how to keep it. Jill certainly is an expert on customer loyalty, and she's got some great information to share with you today. I'm going to get started by sharing a few benchmark metrics, a little data. Certainly, I think customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, customer experience, these are pretty big topics. So I'm going to share with you the data that I do have, and hopefully that will be a good place to start. So, why is customer satisfaction and loyalty such a hot topic? We were just talking a few minutes ago about, a few years ago, this was only something customer service cared about. But now everybody's getting into the act worrying about customer satisfaction and loyalty. You hear it in Wall Street reports. Companies talk about their loyalty metrics in their annual reports for their investors. It's a big, I think, partially because of social media. Everybody can immediately react to news and changes in the marketplace. But one of the key things that we're seeing that is keeping customer satisfaction on the lips of executives is the fact that executive compensation is very commonly now tied to CSAT and loyalty. So I have some numbers here from our benchmark. All of our members are high-tech companies. So you can see industry average 62% of support executive compensation is partially based on CSAT and loyalty. And the numbers, the percentage is pretty large too. 17% of their compensation for enterprise software and consumer software, 16% is the industry average. So I think that's one of the reasons, because when you start talking about people's money and influencing people's paycheck, everybody definitely starts paying attention. So let's go over some of the basics. We survey members asking, do you have a customer satisfaction program? And that is one of the few things that I think every company agrees on. In fact, the TSIA works not just with technical support. We also deal with all kinds of areas of service, education services, professional services, field service, and customer satisfaction is the only metric that is tracked across every one of our service disciplines. So I have to say that while everybody tracks customer satisfaction, that's about where the similarities end. And you can start to see the divergence of practices when you ask what customer satisfaction scale do companies use. I'm a big proponent of the 1 to 5 scale. I think it's simple and easy. But as you can see, 17% of companies are using a 1 to 10 scale. So it gets a little complicated when you're trying to compare your information to your peers' information if everybody's using different scores. But that's one of the points of divergence that you will see starting with customer satisfaction scales, with different response rates for surveys by different channels. There's a lot of interesting information out there. So at TSIA, we recommend that at the close of a support incident that we survey for satisfaction with these areas: the case overall, time to respond, time to resolve, effectiveness or completeness of solution, technical knowledge of the representative, and customer service skills of the representative. So we track data across email and web chat and phone, web self-service, all of the different channels, so that you can compare how you're doing. You can hopefully identify issues before they become big issues. I've got an example here on the next screen of comparing satisfaction between channels. So here you see these are for direct employees. We also track for outsourced employees, but you can see the average satisfaction scores between phone and email. And phone is clearly higher in just about every area except for technical knowledge. We were talking beforehand, these email numbers, while they're not as good as phone, have really gone up quite a bit over the last year. So I don't know if that's, we're seeing more companies, stopping supporting email from customers, a lot of investment in email automation technologies, but it's so important that you track this data over time, because then you start seeing the trending, and you can also understand impacts of any new projects that you're doing, new technologies that you may be introducing.
Hey, John, can I interject here? Can I interject here real quick with a question?
Absolutely.
All right. So, typically it is email and phone, but we've been seeing a trend where web chat is also a useful tool in support. And I was wondering, is TSIA looking into that? Is that something they're going to be studying and researching for future satisfaction scores?
Wow. Well, that's a very timely question. Citrix and I have been working on a joint white paper on best practices for web chat. We're just about to release that, so that'll be out there shortly. Absolutely. We overhauled our benchmark about a year ago, mid or fall 2010, and we're now tracking lots of data about web chat. So we've got satisfaction. We've got all of the performance data, such as average length of an incident and first contact resolution. So all your basic metrics we now have available for chat. And one of the interesting things that we're finding with chat is because you don't have accent neutralization issues because it's all typing and no talking, we have some members that are offshoring their chat interactions, and those interactions are actually getting higher customer satisfaction scores than their phone calls that they're taking here in the U.S. So yeah, definitely there's it's so fascinating looking at all of these numbers about the different channels, and especially as the younger demographics are pushing for more and more things interactive like web chat, and they're loving it. So if you put it out there, we're seeing that customers are adopting it really quickly.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well too with our GoToAssist product because we just integrated web chat. So I definitely concur with you on there.
Yeah, we had some great examples from Citrix through some of their customers and some of your new education tools. So I think there's a lot of exciting things out there. And it turns out that chat is a great channel for tech support. We thought it was maybe more appropriate for very high volume, low complexity, but it turns out we have a lot of our high-tech members are using it. We had a great case study from EMC recently and their success with web chat, and you can't get much more complex than EMC products like Documenta. So I think that says a lot about the channel. So the final slide I'm going to go over here is loyalty is our topic for the day, and it is a very complex topic. And just to illustrate that, I pulled two numbers out of our benchmark, which when people say, we're loyal, we're into the net promoter idea, you always have to push a little bit on exactly what data they're using and how they're collecting it. Because here we have two simple questions. What % of customers will continue to repurchase from you? And what % of customers would recommend you to their peers? And in my thinking, the numbers ought to be pretty similar. But in actuality, they're not. 82% of customers say they'll keep purchasing from you, which is definitely a loyalty score, but only 65% say they would recommend you. So you wonder about that gap between those that like your products enough to keep buying them, but not enough to recommend you to another company. So a lot of really interesting thinking that's been going on in this space, and will continue to as all the new media channels evolve. But definitely our expert on this topic is Jill Griffin, and thrilled to have her here today. So that's all I have. I'll be sticking around for the Q&A portion later in the webcast, and for now I'll turn things back to Jessica.
Great. Thank you, John. Great to hear your comments and research about customer loyalty and satisfaction. So now on to our main speaker, Jill. We're really excited to hear you and learn about the book that you created and how we can all increase our customer service scores. So take it over.
Thank you so much. I'm already, you can tell I've already moved us to the first slide. I was just making sure that my little arrow worked. But let me just say that all the callers on the line today, thank you so much for joining us. You're going to be exposed to an authentic Southern accent. This is a North Carolina accent, and I grew up in a really small town right on the border of North and South Carolina. My hometown was Marshville, and we had about 1,000 people in Marshville, but as small as we were, our little town gave us clear choices about how we spent our money. We had 2 mom-and-pop hardware stores, 2 mom-and-pop pharmacies, 2 mom-and-pop grocery stores, And I remember even as a kid being very aware that one of those stores did more business than its counterpart. And that observation really instilled in me a lifelong interest in what makes people buy, what makes people loyal. And I love the subject of loyalty, and I want to share with you some of the things I've learned through the years. Today, we are going to be as tactical in our discovery as possible. I get real frustrated sometimes when I'm in conferences and all where it's very strategic, but nobody's really doing the drill down on, okay, what are the tools that I can use to really increase loyalty? So I want to really focus today tactically. And by the end of our session today, I hope you'll have in your hands 6 tools. So let's get started. First of all, I know that on the call we've got certainly companies that are B2C, that are going directly to consumers, and then we certainly have companies that are B2B. B2C is, in most cases, less complex than B2B when we're thinking about loyalty tools. So I'm going to give you some examples today of B2C, but I'm also going to drill down on B2B so that we certainly can think in terms of the decision maker, the buyer, the user, the influencer. You've got, several groups to consider when you are thinking about these strategies. So here's really the blueprint for us today. We're going to talk about practicing loyalty principles, looking at the loyalty stages, knowing what matters at each stage, and that's where that emotional component can really start to play. Then we're going to talk briefly about designing a reliable customer experience, because the fact is you cannot drive loyalty without driving experience and delivering a reliable customer experience. And then we're going to touch base on a very important and oftentimes very hard factor, and that is how you unify your company to deliver loyalty building experiences. So let's talk here for a moment about loyalty principles. The big question is your customer loyal? And John hit on this very well earlier, and that is that loyalty is complex, and you have to look deeply at whether someone is really loyal to you. I was on the phone this week with a client, and their corporate color is blue. And he was telling me, he says, our customers tell us that they bleed blue, but I know for a fact that they're spending a lot of money with us, but also with our competitors. So here's some things to think about. When you look at your purchase data, is your customer buying repeatedly? Can you see a consistent repeat purchase cycle there? Are they buying a cross-section of your offerings? Are they showing resilience to the pull of the competition? Or do you know for a fact that your competition is getting also a major piece of your customer share wallet? Are they recommending others? And are you tracking those recommendations? And are you seeing evidence that they are helping you learn? In other words, are they participating in Voice of the Customer surveying? Are they open to serving on advisory councils? Those types of things that are so critical to helping you learn to deliver value time and again. Now, the good news is that there are very specific financial rewards for being loyal, and this is a study that was done by one of my colleagues, Lear Arusi, with a Strativity Group, and he published this in a report that was as recent as February 2011. And you can see what the benefits are of loyal customers. One of my favorite findings on this study is at the very bottom, when you can see the difference between a dissatisfied customer and a loyal customer in regard to their expectations on discounting. Loyal customers know the true value of what you are delivering, and they are willing to pay for it. I'm going to give you some examples of that as we go along. All right, here's one of the first tools that I find with my clients is very important in being able to manage the loyalty stages. And that is the reality that loyalty happens in stages. In my seminars and keynotes a lot of times, I will ask the audience to raise their hand if on the first day that they met that person that became their spouse or their significant other, that they asked for a lifetime commitment on that very first day. And I ask people to raise their hands. And most of the time there's not a hand raised, but every now and then there is a hand raised, and it becomes a very funny story that an audience member shares. So anyway, but for most of us, our loyalty evolves in stages. And when we're thinking of managing the loyalty process as a firm, we need to think in terms of suspects, those people that we suspect may have a need for our product and service, but without more information we can't be sure. Then we think about gravitating that person to a prospect. They have a need for our product and service, and they have the ability to buy. First-time customers, they bought one time from us. Repeat customers, they bought at least twice. Client, they are spending the lion's share of their share of wallet with us. They are buying across product and service categories. And then the last stage, these folks are advocates. They are using social media to advocate for us. They're using just good old word of mouth, but we are seeing evidence that they are true advocates for us. They're raving fans for us. Now, one of the promises on this webinar was, how do we key into the emotions that matter in evolving our customers to ever higher levels of loyalty? And this is, I think, a very important tool to think about. What is important to the customer at each of these stages? So we're going to run through these, and then I'm going to give you some examples of each. But when you're at the suspect stage, it's very important to create presence in the mind of that customer. That customer wants to say, hey, I've heard your name before, or hey, I've heard friends talk about you. But you've got to get in that target market and establish a presence. But simply presence is not enough. Then you've got to build relevance. That prospect has got to say, hey, that person or that firm is feeling my pain, and they have a solution that can help me. But from relevance, it becomes about performance. And there's a report card that starts early with any new buyer. Let's take someone who is signing up. Let's say that you're a business owner and you are going to a bank to open a new business account. And you're going to that bank because you've been told that this particular banker is great at being a visionary and helping you build that banking account into something that's going to help you long term. Well, you can't really measure that banker's ability to do that visionary thinking up front because it's going to take some time to nurture that relationship. But what you can measure that banker on in the beginning is, and that bank on in the beginning is, can you get online quickly? Are you getting your questions answered when you reach out email? If you call, can you get your issue solved in one call? those are performance criteria that happen early and by which you're being judged. So we have to be very mindful of that. But as we're going up this hierarchy, if you will, it becomes less about, it continues to be about performance, but now you've got the added burden of advantage. What are you doing that truly sets you apart and brings an advantage to that buyer that they can't get elsewhere? And then ultimately, in the last two stages, it's all about partnership and being able to evolve in a value delivery means that truly breeds partnership and proves partnership. So let's talk about some examples. All right, let's talk about presence for a moment. I taught at the University of Texas in the business school for several years, and I remember having a lecture for my class, and at the end of a particular lecture, I had a student come up to me who lived in Houston. And during the summers, he would do part-time work at the Mack Hike Chevrolet dealership in Houston. And he told me about a sales rep there. His name was Steve Tran. And Steve Tran was Vietnamese. And he was lagging in his car sales. And Steve Tran made a strategic decision. He said, you know what, I'm trying to deliver to the whole market and people that are walking in just kind of off, off the street. And he said, I've got to get more strategic in thinking about who my customer is. Steve Tran was a former teacher in Vietnam, and when he came to the U.S., his teaching his teaching criteria didn't translate, so he started working at the dealership. So Steve Tran went to the Houston phone book, and by hand, he went into the phone book and started compiling a list of all Vietnamese named households. And so he took those addresses, because they were in the phone book along with the name, and he reached out by letter to these Vietnamese households. And he said, like you, I'm Vietnamese, I'm a former teacher. I've always believed that no one can understand the needs and tastes of Vietnamese people better than another Vietnamese. And he says, I know when you're buying a car, it's a very big investment. Come see me. I can help you. I understand you. Within 4 months, Steve Tran was the top salesman at Mack Hike Chevrolet, and 50% of his sales were coming from Vietnamese customers. So I just want to make the point, it's a simple example, but the importance of presence within a target market. Okay, now let's give another example. Here's another B2C example. This is the Geek Squad. And I had the opportunity to have dinner with the founder, Robert Stephen, I should say, in London several years ago, and he has an amazing story. He started this company just with, just bare minimum, but he was really a genius at being able to create a market presence. And you can see the logo on the Geekmobile. They have these in-store agents, and they have the in-house field agents. They made this whole thing the Geek Squad, of course. You wear these clip-on ties. It's very black and white. They have the, if you have multiple skills as a Geek Squad technician, you can be a double agent, a special agent, or you can even earn this Deputy of Counterintelligence badge. So it's a very successful company. You may know that they were bought by Best Buy back in 2002, They are in the U.S., Puerto Rico, Canada. There are now 24,000 Geek Squad members around the country, around the world, I should say. And they just, Robert Stephen was a genius in creating presence. Now, I want to give you another example of, well, let's move now from presence to relevance. This is one of the web pages from a company that is a brand, it's a naming firm. It's a branding firm, but they specialize in naming names for their clients. And this is not the first page of the website. So this guy over here on the right, don't think that's the first thing you see when you log in on Eat My Words. But what I think this company has done so brilliantly is they give their readers on their website criteria for, are we as relevant to you as our competitors are? And they are as bold as naming their competitors and saying, here's their website, go visit. And does the company have a creative name that sets them apart from a sea of other naming firms? If this is the best they can do for their most important naming client, i.e. themselves, where does that put you? And I just love the boldness and brilliance of creating relevance. So they actually name their competitors. They have links to their competitors, and they really, they challenge the folks that are visiting their website, check out our competitors and see how we compare. And I love that ability to be relevant. All right, here's another B2B example. This is, let's go to my next slide, and I'm trying to, okay, here we go. Okay, this is Ann Machado, who is CEO of a, she is CEO of the firm Creative Staffing out of Miami. They're a $13 million temporary services firm. And what Ann has learned through the years is when they are up to make a sales presentation to a big client, they will do team selling. She brings her 6-member sales team, which consists of a CFO, a sales director, the sales rep, the operations manager, the accounting manager. And she brings the team in for the sales pitch. And what the clients have said is it's nice to be able to see the players, see who we would be interacting with there at Creative Staffing, and it has allowed them to really be successful in selling because they're selling their relevance. And they've even found when they have a client that is being strongly wooed by a competitor, they will reach out with these different tentacles, if you will, into the client that's being heavily wooed and use those key contacts across the client to really continue to stabilize that piece of business. So I like the fact, again, relevance, B2B. Now we're going to talk about performance. And again, think about these emotions that are going on with the client as you get higher and higher into the pyramid. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with 1-800-GOT-JUNK, but the founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK is a gentleman by the name of Brian Skidmore. And the way Brian conceived the product 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he was behind just one of those nasty junk trucks at a drive-through at a McDonald's. And he looked at all this junk that was hanging off, and it was, rickety truck and just terrible. And he thought, there has got to be a better way to help customers haul away junk that's not this rickety sort of deal. So he began 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And what is so compelling about his proposition, I believe, and the reason they've been so successful is the customer knows exactly what the performance standards are going to be. When you pick up the phone to call 1-800-GOT-JUNK, you are connected to the junction, if you will, and there's a great call attendant that gives you a 2-hour window of time of when they will come to your home or your business to remove junk. That's step one. Step two, they come to your business or your home, and a uniformed driver comes in a very nice truck, and they tell you right away how they're going to handle the junk removal and what you can expect. And then the third step is, after they've gotten your junk removed and into their truck, then they will sweep out the space, and they will give you help in being able to remove some things like batteries or mattresses that are sometimes tricky to remove, and they separate out your recyclable materials and so forth. And so it's a really pleasant experience. And Got Junk has just had remarkable sales revenues. They have gone from $2 million in their early stage up to $60 million over a 5-year period. It's just a very pleasant experience. But what this company has done so well is to spell out for the customer what performance they can expect. All right, now we're moving into the Advantage arena. And this is one of my very favorite companies to talk about. In fact, I have written about Bruce Wolpert and his company Granite Rock in all 3 of my books. What is absolutely, almost I would use the word astounding about Granite Rock is this. They sell the most commoditized product you can imagine. They sell rock. They sell granite. And when Bruce Wolpert, who graduated first in his class at Stanford Business School, took over with his brother the family business, Granite Rock had been in existence for 100 years. They have quarries up and down the California coast between San Francisco and Monterey. And they have repeatedly been able to earn a 6% higher price point and win these RFPs from competitors that have much lower pricing. How have they been able to do that? Well, what Bruce will tell you, if you talk to him, is that they started realizing that they weren't simply in the business of creating these perfectly formed piles of granite that their customers would bring trucks in to put on their trucks and then drive off. They realized that they were really also in the business of helping their customers, which are state government, federal, state government, county government workers, taking this rock and using it in, let's say, road projects and all, that they were in the business of getting those trucks off the road, loaded, and back on the road in record time. So when they started measuring this, it took them typically a client that was driving a truck in, it took them 24 minutes from the time they left the road onto the Granite Rock site and then got back on the road again. And Bruce and his team were able to reduce that time on and off the road down to 7 minutes. They were able to take 17 minutes off that load. And they were able to prove to their clients what the cost savings was in regard to crew times by cutting that kind of time in delivery so dramatically. How were they able to do it? Well, they benchmarked with Wells Fargo. They created in the beginning this ATM type system that a truck driver could come on 24/7, use a ATM card to open the gate, drive the truck in. It was programmed so that it poured in from Granite Rock into the truck the exact amount that was scheduled for hauling away. They started out with an ATM system benchmarking with Wells Fargo, and then they ultimately went to a radio frequency sticker on the truck window. So this has allowed Granite Rock to just excel and to bring in these contracts again and again and again, and earning a 6% premium for that. So they took themselves from a commoditized product into a value-driven, non-commoditized sort of delivery. All right, let's move to partnership here for a moment. Whenever I do keynotes for clients, I'm always doing very deep due diligence. And I was doing a presentation for a carrier wholesaler down in Mississippi a couple of years ago. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Steve Craig, who is a 30-year veteran of the heating and air conditioning business. What Steve told me was that before he became an outside sales rep, he had been a purchasing agent at a parts distributor. And he said he always got ticked off because the salesman would come in, flop down on the sofa in his office, and pretty much all they did was deliver a price sheet. And he said, you know, there's got to be a better way. So when he went out as a outside sales rep, he said he went out and started talking to clients and customers, and that he quickly realized that he was selling the same thing as his competitors. So he had to do business in a different way. And he said he realized with his clients that their stock rooms were incredibly disorganized, and it cost them money because oftentimes a truck would go out with the wrong part, couldn't deliver or couldn't do the job for the client, had to come back in, get a different part, and it was just really wasting resources for the distributor. So he went in and offered to do a contractor stocking plan where he would put together a recommended list for the next 10 days of the parts they needed. He would set up bins. He put a warranty basket in. He had a list for whenever they needed a different part, they would write it down on this clipboard, and he would get it when he came in to make his visit. And he even went as far a couple of years later to create a Microsoft Fox Pro software program with their internal programmer that would allow the client to be able to create a proposal. It took it from a 60-minute time to a 10-minute time by using the software. So Steve was a great example of teaching the lesson of what's on your customer's worry list, how can you partner with them to address those worries, and leave your competitor in the dust. All right, so now we're going to talk quickly, because I know that my time is about over, on designing a reliable customer experience. Now, here's some more tools for you. And here's the deal. If we're going to move that customer up that loyalty pyramid, we have got to create a reliable customer experience that brings incredible value to them. So how do we think about that? Well, here are some stages of the customer experience that you might want to think about, and I don't know if many of you know Jean Bliss. She does a lot of work in customer experience. She's a great colleague of mine, and she's done a lot of work in these touch points, and she's been, we've worked together on some things, and I just want you to think about how your customer is thinking about touch points. Think about when that customer first learns about you, and then they buy from you, and then they get what they bought from you. Then they use that product or service. They pay you, and then at some point they're probably having to do a chat online or pick up the phone because they need some servicing. What is happening at each of these customer touch points? Now, I want you to think of these as the micro tools. When we talked about customer stages of loyalty, those are the macro steps that get you up the hierarchy. But at each time that customer is buying from you, they're going through these touch points. So we must know what those moments of truth are in each of these stages, and we've got to make sure and ensure that they are having a very reliable customer experience at each of these stages. You can't, what's happening with most companies are, these things are being delivered in the whole total customer experience is being delivered in a defaulted way rather than a reliable way. And this is what most companies out there are struggling with. And the reason they're struggling is because most companies are being run in silos. And at each of these stages in regard to how the customer is receiving the experience, there are silos involved. I mean, you've got probably sales and marketing, whoever. We need to be thinking about who the silos are that are being involved in touching the customer at each of these stages, and how those silos, how the company needs to be delivering across silos to deliver that real reliable experience. And I got to tell you guys, this is really hard because most companies are operating, the sales department has their thing, the marketing department has their thing, customer care has their thing, IT has their thing. And so a lot of times it's a very convoluted handoff, and the customer loses in the end. And the customers that are really having the greatest customer experiences are from companies that realize this, and they're starting to work across the cross-functional areas for the delivery to the customer.
You know, Jill, can I ask a question here real quickly?
Yes, please.
All right, so I definitely agree, and I think this is a great slide, and pretty much every company I've worked for, I think these silos have existed, and the communication between the groups, so IT and sales and marketing, it hasn't always been the best in uniform, and I'm sure other people on the webinar today feel the same maybe with their companies. So what would you say would be the first step or some tactics to get all of these groups aligned?
Great question. Thank you. The first step that you would want to do is to get a group of cross-functional people together in a room and define the current customer experience. So talk about in each of these stages what the customer is currently experiencing and how the company right now is delivering that experience. So what are the major touch points? Where are the handoffs? Where's the ball being dropped? And how do we know about that? Well, let's look at some of our current customer complaints and trace that back to some of these steps and what's happening in regard to the ball being dropped on behalf of the customer. But you need to start by defining the current customer experience before you can then start getting deeply rooted in how do we make the experience better and improve the customer experience by redefining it. But let me repeat it again. You put a cross-functional group of people together. You talk about the current customer experience as it's being delivered today. Where are the moments of truth for the customer today as we understand it? And where are the problem areas by virtue of our voice of the customer surveying internally, customer complaints, what we're hearing from customer care people that are talking to customers daily, where are the problem areas? And then by defining the current customer experience, then we can go off and start trying to think in terms of how we can improve some of those areas, and that can set up us reconvening as a group to start offering fresh ideas on improvement. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that answers it perfectly. I like all those steps. And how long would you say this process typically takes, or what do you see maybe with companies you work with?
It's a step-by-step process, and you've got old behaviors that you're going to have to address. You've got turf issues that are probably going to surface because of this. So it can't be done overnight. It's going to have to be a process that, takes months, if not more, to get some traction on. You're going to have a lot of support from the top, and it's not going to happen overnight. Now, one of the tools that can be used here, let's go to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, this is what you would call a customer room. And as you start to get your cross-functional group of folks centered on how to improve the customer experience, what I'm trying to portray here is we start collecting data. We start collecting metrics on how are we improving the learning part of the customer experience. I mean, you start thinking about what are the customer metrics that can help us measure how someone as a customer is learning about us. And as we identify what those metrics are, we can start showcasing those in, let's say, a conference room or on a whiteboard that the cross-functional team and those accountabilities that are given across these different silos, they can start thinking about how do we prove that we are truly trending upward in this. So you want to identify metrics in each of these areas and then bring the group together on a monthly basis to talk about progress. And at the end of those meetings, as you're fleshing out who's going to do what, who's going to be accountable in these silos and working together across the firm, then you set goals for the next meeting. Okay, we're going to work on, let's say we know that our customers are having a breakdown when they are having to pay. There's some problems with PayPal accounts, or I've seen that a lot recently with companies that are using PayPal when there's some problems on billing or whatever. How can we start measuring that more effectively so that we know it's seamless for the customer? And here's some metrics we're going to work on, we're going to measure, and the next time we get together, we're going to see what kind of progress we're making. So what you're wanting to do is to create a continuous improvement type process that brings cross-functional areas together on behalf of the customer experience, and that we just are always looking for ways to improve. And we're measuring ourselves month to month.
Hey, Jill, we've got a question here from Jay around that same topic, and he wants to know, don't you need to cross-train people to eliminate silos?
Well, I think that is, there's some truth to that, but the truth is you're never going to train someone in IT to be a legal person. So there's some of these silos that are always going to exist. So rather than cross-training, because someone who's good in IT may not ever have the skill set to bring a legal bearing on something that requires, years of law school. So silos are always going to be a practical matter in companies. And cross-training may have a place in some of this, but rather than cross-training as just the solution, you need to think about how these silos can work together. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it seems like you nailed that one.
Good, thank you. I love questions. So anyway, that's pretty much, let me just kind of conclude here and tell you that if you're liking what you've heard from me today, I have a loyalty tip that I send out, and you can go to my website, loyaltysolutions.com, and sign up, or you can contact me at jill@loyaltysolutions.com, and I'll sign you up. I'll sign up for you. And then also just wanted to conclude by telling you that I've got 3 books: Customer Loyalty, Customer Win Back, and then my newest book is Taming the Search and Switch Customer. So you can find those on Amazon and also on my website. Okay, that's me.